Well, the left, they are just livid, folks. I mean, can you believe what Donald Trump said? He wants to get rid of the garbage. We've been telling you this whole time that he's just a white supremacist. He's a racist. He's just trying to make America white again. That's why America was never great in the first place, because it was built on those white racist men. Well, welcome back to the Revealed Report with your all American made host, John Wilson. No tariffs are needed here. I was made perfectly in the US of A. Well, welcome back to your hour of brilliance and podcasting. And we want to cut through all the noise. We want to bring you the truth of what is occurring today. And I'm glad that you tuned into your guiding light in the midst of all the chaos and noise. Well, President Trump is slashing through all the political correctness. He's very, very upset, and he is just fed up with all the chaos that's coming from the radical left, the lies that has taken place. And he's really fed up with the migration without assimilation that's trying to flip our country inside out and upside down, especially after two of our National Guards were shot. That's when Trump was really, really livid and really upset. And also he's bringing attention to the fraudulent scheme that has taken place up in Minneapolis, where many Somalians are living off of the government. They're living off the back of hardworking taxpayers, and they are also funneling some of that money back into terrorist groups and that. So we'll talk more about that here momentarily. But I want to just say that President Trump is not trying to say that all Somalians are bad. He's trying to call attention to those that want to come into our country, demonize our country, do not want to assimilate to the founding principles of our nation, do not love our nation, and want to change our nation from the inside out while using taxpayers' dollars to do it. That's what Trump is upset with. And he doesn't like Ilhan Omar. None of us should like Ilhan Omar. That ideology does not belong in the United States of America. This whole idea of multiculturalism is just the idea that everybody else that can bring their broken ideologies that they fled their countries from and bring it right into the United States of America to try to destroy our country from inside out. If people come here, they should fall in love with the founding principles of the U.S. They should fall in love with the idea of the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, and the U.S. Constitution. They should fall in love with the idea, at least, that it was built on Christianity, and not try to undermine that and erase that. Yes, you don't have to be a Christian. You can be an atheist. You can even be a Muslim, but that doesn't give you a right to try to change the United States of America. It doesn't give you the right to rot it out within and begin to flip it into something that our founders never intended it to be. And so that's what President Trump is upset with. Now, his choice of language did allow the radical left to begin to jump on him, but one of the reasons why we wanted President Trump is because we were tired of all the political correctness. Political correctness is rotting out our country. Political correctness is sending us on a dystopian path to hell. And so at some point, we have to get away from the political correctness. And what's going to happen if we keep allowing the political correctness to destroy our country, there's two things that's going to happen. You're going to have those, as you see on the left, that are just sold into political correctness. I mean, that is their gospel. Political correctness, they believe, is the message of salvation to them. However, you're going to have a counterculture movement that's going to snap back far the other direction, and they're going to get much uglier than what we want them to be. And so I'm glad in one sense that President Trump doesn't play by the political correctness book. He smashes right through all of that. You may not like it. We may not always agree with what he says, but I'm glad there's somebody who has taken a hammer to political correctness. Now, we're not trying to demonize all the Somalians. And as a matter of fact, we who are Bible believers believe they were made in the image of God. And we want to reach every soul we can with the gospel of Jesus Christ. But that doesn't mean that we can't look at cultures and say there's a cultural issue. There's a cultural problem. Political correctness has destroyed the ability to look at cultures and say there is an issue predominantly with the culture. That doesn't mean everybody, but with the culture, there's some issues, and that means we got to be on alert. We have to vet them out. We have to vet them out, maybe even a little bit more so than somebody that comes from a country that's more of a democracy. And so the left is losing their mind. They're saying that Trump is trying to make America white again, and he hates the Somalians. President Trump doesn't hate every Somalian, but he does have a concern with the culture, and there's legitimate reasons why he has concern with the culture. Now, here's President Trump in his words, and this is what got him in an uproar.
Somalians ripped off that state for billions of dollars, billions, every year, billions of dollars, and they contribute nothing. The welfare is like 88%. They contribute nothing. I don't want them in our country, I'll be honest with you, okay? Somebody would say, oh, that's not politically correct. I don't care. I don't want them in our country. Their country's no good for a reason. Their country stinks, and we don't want them in our country. I could say that about other countries, too. I can say it about other countries, too. We don't want them to hell. We have to rebuild our country. You know, our country's at a tipping point. We could go bad. We're at a tipping point. I don't know if people mind me saying that, but I'm saying it. We could go one way or the other, and we're going to go the wrong way if we keep taking in garbage into our country. Ilhan Omar is garbage. She's garbage. Her friends are garbage. These aren't people that work. These aren't people that say, let's go, come on, let's make this place great. These are people that do nothing but complain. They complain. And from where they came from, they got nothing. You know, they came from paradise, and they said, this isn't paradise. But when they come from hell.
So look at the distinction there. What he's actually saying is the people that are like Ilhan Omar that don't want to contribute to the society, they just want to come here. They want to live on taxpayer dollars. They don't want to contribute. And at the same time, they want to demonize the United States of America and act like their country was greater, even though they fled from their country. They come to the United States of America because of our freedoms and because of the fact that they can get government welfare. And so that's what Trump is actually talking about. He's distinguishing the difference. If you listen there closely, he's not trying to say that every person from Somalia is just a monster or whatever. He's distinguishing the fact that he's talking about the Ilhan Omar types that want to come to our country and demonize our country, that doesn't even like our country, that's representing the people of our country while not even loving the very United States of America. That's the problem that Trump has. And Trump also understands that there is an Islamic infiltration into our nation, that the Islamists that are trying to come in here are coming in, wanting to push Sharia law everywhere they can. They do not want to assimilate to the principles of the United States of America. They want to demonize our country while using taxpayer dollars to funnel back the acts of terrorism against our country. And on the very cuff of the two guardsmen that was shot, that's why Trump is very upset. He's stopping all migration from third world countries, which he properly should, and he's doing a strong vetting process. Also, there is fraudulent activity that is taking place predominantly among the Somalian culture. And so we'll talk about that. We'll get into those details. But President Trump is not just demonizing every Somalian. He's really distinguishing the fact that there are some people that come to our country that hate our country. Why are they here? Why do we want them here? We shouldn't want anybody coming here that doesn't love the United States of America, that doesn't believe in the founding principles of the United States of America. That's not trying to make America white again. That's trying to restore America back to the founding principles, which the radical left don't understand at all because they take history by sound bites and try to demonize our nation. It's not a matter of the color of the skin. It's a matter of whether or not you believe in the Declaration of Independence, you believe in the Bill of Rights, you believe in the U.S. Constitution, you believe in the founding principles. That's what makes the difference. Now, since we want to talk about cultures, we've been sold a lie from the radical left about cultural relativism. And cultural relativism is this idea that all cultures are equal. There's no culture that's better than another culture. And this was actually a subversive way for them to try to minimize and relegate American exceptionalism to be an absolutely nothing, because the radical left doesn't believe in American exceptionalism. They don't believe America was exceptional. They hate the United States of America. They hate the founding principles of the United States of America. That's why they have no problem with open borders. That's why they had no problem with a bunch of Afghan refugees coming into our country without being vetted, who many of them don't even like the United States of America. They don't have a problem with that because they join league with those that say death to America and death to Israel, because they don't like the founding principles of the West. And so you can see that in the college universities and for many decades in our education system, they've been trying to tear down American exceptionalism. And I've been telling you over and over again that America is not exceptional because some of us are brighter, even though some of us are. And it's not because some of us are better looking, even though some of us do have an upper hand. It's not because God just likes America more than everybody else. It has nothing to do with any of that. American exceptionalism is based on the fact that we were the exception to the rule in history, that we did something different. A government representing the people, ran by the people, for the people, that had never been heard of before. That's what created American exceptionalism and the American dream, that you can go up the ladder and you can become greater with the greatest liberties and freedoms. That's what makes America American exceptional. And so they don't like the idea of American exceptionalism. They don't like the idea that we could have a better culture and a better founding principles than any other country. They believe that's bigoted. They believe that's racist to think that, to believe that, to feel that way. They don't really like patriotism because that means you're putting your country above the world, and they have a globalist agenda where they want to say that everybody is always equal because they believe in the Karl Marx ideology: to every man's need, to every man's ability, equal ends. They don't want anybody to feel like they may be better than somebody else. These are the same people that want to take away the ability for kids to win championships in sports because that means somebody is being told that they do better than somebody else. And that might hurt somebody's feelings because the radical left doesn't base anything on truth. Everything is based on emotional feelings. It's all on fickle emotional feelings. That's all it is. That's all the radical left is, because they don't believe in eternal truth. So when you eliminate and extrapolate the idea of truth out of the world, then all you have is feelings, and their feelings begin to deceive them. And so they wanted to tear down the idea of American exceptionalism in our education system, and especially in our college universities, and say that there is cultural relativism, meaning all cultures are really equal. You have to respect the cultures for what they are. And it was just a subversive way to try to tear down America and say that America is no greater than any other country, which is why MAGA offends them as well. Make America great again. It was Barack Hussein Obama that wanted to fundamentally transform America and then go apologize to the world for America. It was President Trump that says we want to go back to the founding principles that made this nation so great in the first place, that made it the nation that people will come into our country, sometimes even getting on rafts and going across shark-infested waters to get into our country because it's the best country in the world. And we're not ashamed to say that. That doesn't mean that God likes us better than everybody else, but there is some cultures that produce greater liberty, greater freedom. It produces greater good. We have produced more humanitarian aid than any other country. We have funded more missionaries than any other country. We have given more people ability to make their life better than any other country. We believe in American exceptionalism, and we're not afraid to say that. We love the United States of America. We are patriotic at heart. So let's talk about cultural differences. We see that there was a Somalian man who abducted and raped a 12-year-old girl. And then on top of that, the Islamic Center in St. Paul, Minnesota, which is ironic, St. Paul named after St. Paul, the apostle of the Bible, Christianity. Yet the Islamic Center begins to write to the community. Minnesota law allows Quentin Ibrahim Dori to be released from prison in 2033, lightening the sentence. But watch this. This is from the Alpha News. This is the Islamic Center's letter in defense of the Somalian that raped this 12-year-old girl. A Somali immigrant living in the United States has been sentenced to 12 years imprisonment for raping a 12-year-old girl. Okay, now watch this. This is what they write. According to criminal charges, the victim had contact information for a Mohammed Musa, and the victim said Mohammed Musa was the man who assaulted her using the cell phone contact. Okay. On May 28, 2025, a jury found Dure guilty of first-degree criminal sexual conduct after he committed this evil act. But we find that this letter they wrote, and they said he is a deeply good man whose presence enriches the lives of those around him, unless you're a 12-year-old girl. They want his character to be considered, his contributions, and his ongoing potential when making their decisions. But this is what they say. Watch this. We, the undersigned members of the Somali community, write this letter to um, they got a little cut off here for some reason, but this is what I really want to get to. They begin to try to say that the court system should be sympathetic for him because he's trying to acclimate to a new culture. He's trying to acclimate to this culture of the United States of America. It's very hard for him just to quit raping girls overnight. You can't expect that because in their culture that's allowed. It's allowed in their culture. So you can't expect him just to quit raping girls overnight because he came to the United States of America. This is what the Islamic Center in Minnesota began to write in defense of this Somalian man that raped this 12-year-old girl. Now, that doesn't mean that all Somalians are bad, but if they're saying that he's trying to acclimate to a new culture, and that's the justification for him raping a 12-year-old girl, then I think it's fair to say that there are certain cultures that we must vet them stronger to let them come into our country because we have to protect the United States of American citizens. And so it's radically crazy to me that they thought it was a good justifiable reason to lighten his sentence on the basis of him trying to acclimate to a new culture. So my question is, if it's okay to have a rape culture over there, which I find it ironic because about 10 years ago, they were talking about rape culture inside of our college universities and never really provided much good information. And they were demonizing many of the young men today because they were saying there's a rape culture on Harvard campus and all of that. But yet we're supposed to allow a rape culture just to come into our country without strongly vetting them out. That's the problem that Trump is having. That's the reason why Trump is so frustrated. And that's why Trump is calling it out. And yet the radical left is losing their mind over it. But there is certain cultures that does not believe in what we believe in. They don't believe in the principles that we believe in. And I'm not saying none of them can come here, but if they're going to try to come here, we must strongly vet them out and ensure that we're protecting the United States of American citizens. Lion Biden, Calamity Kamala Harris, and that whole administration just let anybody come in without vetting them out. And we've seen over and over again this violence and the raping of women. And yet, if you call it out, then they're telling you, oh, you just racist. You're just bigoted. Oh, you just want to make America white again. That's all that's about. They're deceivers, and they always wear the noble mask while lying to the American public. That's the problem with the radical left, and that's why they can't win the midterms. That's why we can't allow them to win the midterms. And Trump is strongly calling attention to Minnesota's social services fraud on Governor Tim Walz's watch. And we'll talk about the details of that momentarily. But I want to say that if we don't address the political correctness road that we're on, which is a dystopian road to hell, we're going to become like the UK. Let me tell you what's going on in the UK. Just, some months back on the Revealed Report, I talked about how there was a comedian that was arrested by the authorities because he made a post about a comment towards the LGBTQ2 plus community. And that comment was this, that if one of those men act like a woman and goes into the bathroom, then they should probably be punched in the face, is what he was saying. Then what happened was he had the authorities arrest him at his door because they said it's a hate crime against the LGBTQ2 plus community. Now what you find is there was a woman who was physically assaulted by a man. She was physically assaulted by this man. Then in her anger, she began to make a public post and began to indicate that he was gay. She began to say that he was gay, but she said it in a way using a slur word that rhymes with maggot. And so she called him a word that rhymes with maggot. And even though she was physically assaulted, the UK came and they arrested her. They arrested her because of her slur, because that is a hate crime against the gay and lesbian community. And so we can't allow that. So they arrested her while this man was the one that aggressively attacked her. And so that's what we're coming to, which, by the way, I don't know. How did they know she wasn't talking about a cigarette? How did they know she wasn't calling him a cigarette? Because over there, the word for cigarette is faggot. And so, it could have been, kind of like, hey, hey, mate, I'm going to go out and smoke me a faggot and I'll be back here in a bit. But, you know, the radical left gets offended by everything to the point that they'll defend the person that physically assaulted the woman and arrest the woman for using a slur word that they didn't like. Now, I'm not saying she should have used the slur word, but I am trying to say that they're swallowing camels and straining at gnats. I mean, think about what they're doing. They're calling speech violence while they celebrate actual violence. They celebrated the assassination of Charlie Kirk. They began to get upset and they were saddened by the fact that the assassination attempt on Donald Trump was not successful. And so they celebrate all of that violence while they call speech violence. You know, Tyler Robinson, when he assassinated Charlie Kirk, you know, he should be defended because Charlie Kirk was the one that actually brought that on himself, because it was Charlie Kirk that was violent. This is the radical thinking of the radical left. That's what they do. They flip it all upside down. Violence is not really violence if it comes from their side, but speech is violence if they don't like what you're saying. And so that is the very element and nature of the radical left. And that's why they must be politically, ideologically, and especially spiritually defeated, especially in the midterms and especially in 2028. Now, I do want to talk about the fraudulent activity that has taken place in Minnesota. We find from whitehouse.gov, I quote in between my formerly nicotine-stained fingers, as Rush Limbaugh would say, President Donald J. Trump is right. Minnesota has become a hub of fraudulent money laundering activity, where refugees from Somalia are completely taking over the once great state. Nowhere is that more evident than the shocking fraud scandal that took place under the incompetence of deeply disturbed Democrat Governor Tim Walz, in which 78 of the 86 individuals charged so far are of Somali ancestry. Democrats allowed a $1+ billion heist to take place. Dozens of individuals, largely of East African descent, looted taxpayers out of over $1 billion that was intended for child food assistance in what amounted to the country's largest pandemic relief fraud scheme. Let's stop right there. So these are the ones on the radical left that always want to talk about, oh, there's a Holocaust. It's a Holocaust. It's genocide. The Jews are committing genocide and they're killing all these babies and they're starving all these children, which most of the time is an absolute lie because they're getting their information from Hamas that lies to the people all the time because of their propaganda game. However, yet while they say that, they allowed this to take place, which was robbing children from being able to get food. This shows you the hypocrisy of the radical left. $1 billion plus heist. Dozens of individuals from largely of East African descent looted taxpayers out of over $1 billion that was intended for child food assistance. And these were the ones that went and lost their mind when 42 million people were not getting their SNAP benefits because they wanted to keep the government shut down and wanted to spin the narrative and act like it was Trump shut down when it was Schumer shut down because he wanted to bow down to the radical left base, because he was too scared to stand up against them, because he knew that they would try to primary him, which they're going to do anyways because he failed. And finally, they had to bend the knee because the Republicans, for the first time, were not cowards because of that orange man with too many red ties. And so you can see that they really don't care about the starving kids. That's not what they care about. They use anything they can as leverage in their Trump derangement syndrome because they hate the founding principles of the United States of America. And the truth of the matter is, it's not even Trump derangement syndrome. It's America's founding principles syndrome. That's what they really hate. They hate the idea of the founding principles of the West. I continue to read. The fraud involved a massive complex network of nonprofits and affiliates largely run through the Somali community. Nonprofits tied to the Somali community claim to have fed tens of thousands of non-existent hungry children, claimed to have provided services to non-existent homeless, and claimed to have provided therapy for non-existent autistic Somali children. Kickbacks were paid, lavish lifestyles were funded, and money was sent overseas, some of it even allegedly funneled to a terror group. Yeah, that's what Trump doesn't want. He doesn't want taxpayers funding terrorism in our own country and elsewhere, which, by the way, I have to ask the question, if the radical left is so concerned about the poor, then why do they let the poor get robbed by people that they're too afraid to offend, like Black Lives Matters? Remember BLM when they were lighting our cities on fire with Antifa, stealing Louis Vuitton purses, and they were collecting taxpayer dollars and never using it to build Black communities, but they were living their lavish lifestyles in their mansions and their nice vehicles. And now we can see the same thing is taking place. The radical left does not care about the poor. They never have cared about the poor. They just wear that noble mask, flip the script, and demonize their political opposition. I continue to quote, the massive scandal unfolded on Wall's watch, and he did absolutely nothing about it, probably because he wasn't smart enough to do anything about it anyways. All enforcement has been, I'm not going to use Trump's word for it. All enforcement has been at the federal, not state level. In fact, the state's cowardly Democrat officials were reluctant to act, tolerating, if not tactically allowing the fraud, and ignoring whistleblowers to avoid political backlash among the Somali community and accusations of racism. President Trump has taken action. The Trump administration is terminating temporary protected status for Somalis, indefinitely halting migration from third world countries, and re-examining green cards for every alien from every country of concern, pausing all asylum decisions and more, all as part of its relentless effort to ensure migrants that remain are a net positive on our society. Way to go, President Trump. We fully support you and we're praying for you. This goes to show you that President Trump understands something the radical left doesn't understand, that people want to use the racist statement or slogan as a gun to people's head to try to get you to bow down to their pressure. It's time for America to quit worrying about being labeled these things. We're past all of that. We need to quit worrying about all the labels they try to slap on us, because at the end of it, it doesn't mean anything. It's just them trying to flip the script and use anything they can to tear apart America. And we find that the radical left, they don't have a backbone anyways to stand up against anybody. Let's continue from the Washington Post. Tim Walz can't admit the downsides of too much welfare. Of course not. They don't understand the downside of welfare because they don't understand that taxpayers are paying for this. I quote, "In Minnesota too well governed? Is Minnesota too well governed? Question mark." That was Governor Tim Walz's explanation for how his state allowed more than $1 billion worth of public funds to be stolen on his watch. The Democrat explained Sunday on NBC's Meet the Press that Minnesota is a generous, prosperous, and well-run state. We AAA bond rated, he said, but that attracts criminals. This guy is so dumb. I'm sorry. Lord, forgive me. But these people, how do you get this ignorant? Or how do you lie this much? How do you try to deceive we had $1+ billion of fraud, and children wasn't being fed, and the homeless wasn't being taken care of, and people that needed medical attention wasn't getting it, and people were living lavish lifestyles because we ran a real good state. We did a very good job with the budget. We're so running well that we're funding criminals. That's how well we're running things. Think about it. We're running so good that we can help fund criminals. That's how great our state is. Tim Walz is absolutely out of his mind. And can you believe he could have potentially been the vice president of the United States? But then again, Calamity Connie Harris could have been the president of the United States. From the Fox News. Tim Walz called out by Washington Post for refusing to take responsibility for Minnesota fraud scandal. I quote, Democratic Minnesota Governor Tim Walz isn't helping himself by refusing to take responsibility for the welfare fraud that occurred in plain sight during the COVID-19 pandemic in his state, the Washington Post editorial board wrote Wednesday. The Justice Department announced new charges last week against the 78th defendant in the Feeding Our Future fraud scheme, which prosecutors say involved more than $250 million in stolen funds from federally funded children nutrition program and has already resulted in over 50 convictions. Many of those charged come from Minnesota's Somali community. The governor is not helping himself by refusing to take responsibility for the welfare fraud that happened in plain sight during the pandemic. Residents, mostly of Somali descent, targeted established Medicaid programs. They opened fake food distribution centers and autism centers to funnel resources away from the neediest. The numbers alone made clear what was happening, the editors wrote. Autism centers in Minnesota grew by 700% between 2018 and 2023, once it became clear how much welfare money was available for the taking. Funding increased by 3,000% from $6 million to almost $192 million. No reasonable person could possibly believe this money was addressing a real surge in autism, yet attempts to flag strange trends went unanswered, they continued. The editorial board pointed to Wall's appearance on Meet the Press on Sunday when he was pressed on whether he wanted to take responsibility for failing to stop fraud in the states. Well, certainly I take responsibility for putting people in jail. Governors don't get to just talk theoretically. We have to solve problems, and I will note, it's not just Somalis. Minnesota is a generous state. Minnesota is a prosperous state, a well-run state. We have a AAA bond rating, but that attracts criminals. Those people are going to jail, and we are doing everything we can, but to demonize an entire community on the actions of a few, it's lazy. Walls responded. Well, I'll tell you what, Pam Bondi, you know who also probably should be investigated and maybe have to pay a price? Every Democrat politician that knew about this was involved in it, including Tim Walz. If he was involved allegedly, I'll say we think he might have been. And so this is radically crazy. And so now that President Trump wants to crack down on it, now they come out and here is a police officer from Minnesota. And, just listen to what he has to say so you can clearly understand what their position is on this.
ayaa ka caawinaa wixii aragtay inaad samaysid waa fahanna Soomaa arinta kale ku soo xigta waxay tahay haddii qof aad u malaynaysid inuu
The officer had to say, did you catch all of that? Did you understand everything he was saying? And so none of us understand what he was saying. And I'm sure the governor there didn't understand either. However, what he was actually saying is that we're going to protect the Somali community against ICE agents. So let me tell you what is happening in the United States of America. There is an attempted insurrection by the radical left and by foreigners that does not want to assimilate to the United States of America. Now, as a child of God to other children of God, we believe that every soul should try to be reached with the gospel of Jesus Christ, which, by the way, though, the kingdom of God does require conversion and repentance, and it does require a change of life. And so the nation should too. If you're going to come to the United States of America, first of all, you should probably learn the language. You should learn the culture. You should fall in love with the founding principles of the United States of America. And you should know about our great country and what makes it great. And you should fall in love with it. You shouldn't flee from countries that are dystopian and then try to bring those broken ideas right into our country and try to fight against a man that is trying to protect our cities and try to protect the United States of America. We don't want any more Army National Guards being shot by terrorists. We need to make sure that the people that came here is vetted properly, and we need to make sure that the United States citizens are safe. We need to make sure that 12-year-old girls are safe and not being raped by people that thinks that's culturally okay, and then have Islamic centers try to say, well, that happened because you got to understand they're trying to acclimate to a new culture because that's normal in their culture. That's the issue that Trump has. He's not trying to demonize every person that is not white. That is not what he's trying to do. But he is addressing the fact that there are some cultural issues, and we got to get this cleaned up because America was on a dangerous path of great terrorism taking place inside of our nation. And now, because he's cracking down on that, he's protecting the future of the United States of America. But the radical left and all of the immigrants that want to come in without assimilating are doing a color revolution. They are doing a coup, and there is an insurrection that's taking place, which is why the National Guards were issued into cities like Washington, D.C., and rightfully so, because this is pure rebellion. This is insurrection against our nation. What they are trying to do is flood people in that hate our country because the left hates our country, and to use them to begin to drown out the culture of the United States of America so they eventually can replace July 4th with Juneteenth. They can eventually replace Columbus Day with Indigenous People Day, as they've been successfully doing. And then they can replace the American flag with the Pride Progress flag. And they can erode the United States of America and then try to push it into their globalized Marxist blended with fascistic ideology called the Great Reset. President Trump was the first one to stand up, break the political correctness, push back on the narrative, and begin to try to restore the United States back to being a great country. And what does the radical left do? They try to claim, oh, he's just trying to make America white again. They are liars and they are deceivers, and we're going to keep saying it. May I tell you, this is the radical ones that wanted to try to tell you that men can be women, women can be men, that men can compete in women's sports and beat the brains out of women, that they can put their drag queen story hours right in your children's schools and libraries at a young age, try to sexually transform your children, try to get them to change their biological sex without the permission of the parents. And if a dad or a mom doesn't like that, then they can actually try to take the child from the parents and even try to jail the parents. That's the radical left. They wanted to close down our middle-class businesses during COVID. They wanted to shutter the doors of our churches during COVID. And if you wonder why I'm so passionate against it, is because I thought once upon a time I was going to get arrested for simply going to church in the United States of America. That's the problem I have, because I love the founding principles of this nation. I love the idea that we get our certain inalienable rights from God, not from government, and that government is to protect those rights. It's worth fighting for. It's worth speaking out against. We cannot be rocked to sleep. And I've been saying it ever since the very conception of the Revealed Report, that we cannot just sleep and just slumber and act like everything's okay because President Trump became the president. We still have a battle. We still have a fight, and we must defeat the radical left, because if we don't, they're going to defeat the very principles of the United States of America. We will become a bankrupt society. We will not have our freedoms anymore like we have. I love the ability to wake my kids up on Sunday morning, take them to church, and we don't have to hide from the authorities to worship our God. That is worth living for. That is worth defending. That is worth protecting. And that is worth dying for. And so, hey, if you love America, it's simple. I keep saying it. It's real simple. Vote Republican. I know a lot of them are milquetoast reprobates, but they're better than the Democrat Party. If you hate America, vote for the Democrats. They'll deliver on that hatred. And most of all, we need to pray. We need to pray for the president, because we need God to intervene. We need miracles in our nation. We are at a crossroads, just like Trump said, where we can either go the right way or we can go down a very bad path. And we're trying to undo what has been going on for over a century. Since the late 1800s, we've been on this bad path, especially in the early 1900s with the rise of the digressive movement. And so I'm glad that Trump is taking the border serious. I'm glad he's taking lawlessness serious. I'm glad that he's trying to make a safe nation. And I'm glad that he's trying to build our nation back up. And we do believe that if you're going to come here, you should be a net positive for our country, and you should be an asset for our country, and you should love our country. You should want to learn the language and the culture of our country. Yes, the melting pot's fine. I like different foods. I like Cajun food. I like Chinese food. I like Mexican food. I like all of that. I like the music. That's fine. However, when it comes to the principles, when it comes to our civics, when it comes to our culture, There does need to be assimilation to the United States of America founding principles. Otherwise, we can lose our ability to have church freely like we do. Russia never thought it would happen to them. China never thought it would happen to them. They never thought that day would come. They never thought there would be economic collapse and tyranny and all these things. They never thought there would be gulags. They never thought they would be in endless bread lines just to get a little bit of food. It happened bit by bit, piece by piece, by people that wanted to change their nation. That's why we can't allow it here. And so I fully support the President of the United States, and I am praying for him. For those that like the Oracle podcast, you like me diving into the Word of God. Right now, we've been going through the book of Revelations. If you like that content, I'm sorry. Usually we do it on Thursday nights. I've been under the weather here this week, not feeling the best, probably because I got out and played in the snow like a big kid with my kids. So I'm paying the price for it. I guess I'm getting older and I don't like to admit that. But if you like that content, tune in tomorrow night at 7:30 p.m. and we will have the Oracle podcast. We'll be diving into Revelation chapter 9. Also, we will be back on air at 6:30 p.m. for the Revealed Report. We apologize for the technical difficulties that we were having tonight. By the way, if you haven't got it, my book, The Final Flame, it's a novel mystery thriller packed with a lot of suspense, a lot of plot twists, and good, clean romance, as well as a lot of action for the men. You can get it on Amazon by your favorite podcast host, of course, or you can get your signed edition if you really want the special one by emailing us at revealedpublications@gmail.com, where we can give you the details on how to get a signed copy. Well, we know the church will be standing by tomorrow because Jesus said, upon this rock, the gates of hell shall never prevail against it. But if the republic has not totally been burned down by tomorrow, I will see you then. God bless you, America. Have a great night.